Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, my colleague Russell Berger, both attorneys at Offit Kurman. And today we are talking about the FTC's final rule on the non-compete ban. So this has been something that has been taking the headlines by storm since last week. As far as just, we've been hearing about it in the past when they were considering passing this rule, but recently they voted to ban non-competes. I mean, that's really the high level of it, right? And what you see in the headlines. The rule itself is, and all the guidance from them is about 570 pages long, but we won't go through 570 pages worth of insight on the FTC non-compete ban. But, practically speaking, Russell, what should employers be thinking about now that this vote has passed?
Yeah. So the quick version, summary of the 570 pages is in almost all circumstances, non-competes are not going to be allowed, presuming this rule actually goes into effect 120 days from whenever it's published and survives any legal challenges. I'm not, I'm inclined to think that it's not going to survive legal challenges. So, I'm not in a rush to tell employers to get compliant with this new rule. As of yet, I think there's going to be extensive challenges. The Chamber of Commerce filed a lawsuit the day after the rule came out. So, like we often say here, this is kind of a wait and see. You should be monitoring, you should be paying attention to it approach. In the meantime, as anybody who's watched almost 200 of our episodes at this point knows, we're not the biggest fans of non-compete in terms of their effectiveness or their cost of enforcement, but rather they're a tool that an employer has at its disposal, but sometimes it's not always the right tool. So what I would suggest all employers should be doing, particularly those that already have non-compete agreements in place, is going back and looking at their agreements and thinking about whether or not they're covered from other bases. So that's things like confidentiality provisions and restrictions. That's things like customer non-solicit provisions. That's also things like training reimbursement programs, tuition reimbursement. All are these things that are a little bit more narrow, a little bit more targeted, in place, customized, enforceable. That's really what I think employers should be looking at, because whether or not the non-compete ban stands, these are important tools that are still going to be in place in another 120 days regardless, and you want them to be effective, enforceable, and narrowly targeted.
Yeah, and as it relates to other types of provisions, you mentioned non-solicitation provisions, and a lot of times those will be in an agreement together with a non-compete, and people, lay folks might use those terms interchangeably. So that's something to consider as well, that this non-compete ban does not specifically ban non-solicitation agreements. That being said, if a non-solicitation is like a non-compete, there is some nuance to that where it still may fall under the rule and the ban. So some things to consider there, but won't get too in the weeds on that here. But that is something just to consider, that those are different. The not soliciting customers is a lot different than just a blanket non-compete. So those are some helpful tools that people are still going to be able to use. The other thing is just the practical piece of this, right? So this is making all different types of news headlines, all the way from CNN to legal publications. So I know that, employees who are subject to these non-competes, they're seeing this as well, right? And they're not going to necessarily always be following the nuance of whether there's legal challenges and what's going on with that. So I do think we will see a lot of folks maybe changing their behavior based on seeing that this has come out. So something to consider if you do have employees under these bans is that, or under these non-competes, is that they may think that no longer applies to them. So there may be some consequences, just practical consequences, while we kind of wait and see how things shake out. So it's good to have a plan on how you might want to be wanting to address those concerns, and whether, and employee behavior and the questions that come up in that context as well.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, I think you're right. But for the next 120 days or however long this hangs out there as a question mark, the ground's going to be shifting, and we know the ground is shifting away from enforceability of non-competes generally before this FTC rule. And we know in the state of Maryland, for example, it's limited in its application. So, it's just all the more reason to think about all the tools at your disposal to continue to take the temperature of your employees, and to monitor what happens here. Because, if for some reason the FTC rule does stay in effect, then there's going to have to be some action. And, I'm sure we'll be back here and talking through that if and when that day comes. But, for now, I think it's wait and see, keep an eye on it, keep your finger on the pulse, and, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, this certainly won't be the last time we talk about non-competes on this program, I'm sure.
That's right.
Well, thanks, Russell. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sarah.